Thank you all. And I will once again introduce, we are in the work session for the Tigard-Tualatin School Board. Our focus this evening is to continue our equity work with our facilitators, John Lenson and Tara Cooper. And I'm going to hand over this work this evening to John and Tara and let them take it from here. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Maureen. I think I will begin and set the context for our meeting. And Tara will be sharing a PowerPoint as we move forward. So Tara and I, based on our previous meetings with you and then individual meetings with directors, we're really stepping into the learning part of our work with you. And one of the jumping off points for the learning really involve the agreements that you've already established. And we're going to reference them tonight, but we're actually going to shift a little bit towards, rather than the working agreements in terms of communication with the public, that's more performative. We're going to spend a little more time on communication agreements, and especially communication within the board, because that was a priority for all of you. And so as we do that, we're going to focus on some key agreements that will actually deepen your dialogue and your listening with each other, and we'll step into a foundation piece for leadership for equity. And so that's our intention, and our expectation as we do this work and we get better at these difficult and uncomfortable conversations, that actually a stronger sense of community and trust will actually emerge, especially as you engage in difficult conversations and even conflict over time. But as you do that, it actually strengthens your community. So that's kind of the context for our work with everyone. Tara, do you want me to keep going, or do you want to preview the agenda?
You can keep going.
All right, I will keep going. So this is kind of the welcome and overview. We are, as I said, we really are going to focus on communication and then actually practicing some of those agreements. And we're going to practice the communication around understanding educational equity. We sent out in advance several different definitions of equity in education. So we're going to lean into those definitions, not just to reach a common understanding, but to also understand personal definitions, what has meaning for each of you and what your priorities are. And then we will move into next steps.
So John, I apologize to interrupt for a second, but it just dawned on me. I think I sent those equity definitions. Rowan or Eddie, did you guys get those? Because I will forward them to you so that you have them in your, I sent them just, I think, to the board last night. So Patty, I'm just going to send them to you. And if you can just forward them to the students and to cabinet, that'd be awesome. Okay, please go ahead, John. My apologies.
Well, and our frame really is around strengthening communication, to go deeper, to probe more. And at this point, I think I will hand it over to Tara.
Excellent. Good evening, everyone. One of the things that we reflected on as we were thinking about what are some areas around communication we could talk about tonight is, of course, the art of communication, which you likely have seen from Director Unn, as she often uses, and it's part of the TTSD culture. And we have the art of community listed here, but what we were thinking about specifically out of all of these, well, in addition to all of these, was the highlighted, bolded section. We slow down, we have time to think and reflect. And that's really what these two community commitments or communication commitments are about that we're going to introduce to you. So the first one, be attentive to impact and resist the temptation to defend and clarify your intention. In these conversations in which we are, passionately invested, sometimes it's hard to just stop and listen and have that reflecting moment. But in being attentive to impact, we ask that you listen to understand the impact of your words and actions. And in doing so, you consider the impact of your words and actions, whether intentional or unintentional. And in that moment, as you respond, your response is in terms of your impact or the impact, and to let the person know, let people know that you heard their words and the impact on them. John, is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, and there are some skills with this that we will be working with you on over time, and we'll step into that, this evening. And we're really moving away from this whole notion, well, we all have good intentions, and please just know that I'm a good person. And while that is true, there is impact, and our words and our meanings land differently for different people. That's where we slow down.
Along those lines, it can be difficult to hear when we've negatively impacted someone, especially when it was not our intention. But what we're calling for here is that we make space for other perspectives and ways of being. And that often means a sacrifice or letting go of something. So kind of a question that I pose here as we offer this as a potential communication guideline is, what are you willing to do differently to create space to hear and better understand others? Oftentimes, again, in the space where we're so passionate about the things that we're talking about and sometimes debating about, it's really easy to get caught up in this right or wrong, my way or their way, I have to give in, they have to give in. But if we move beyond that to make space for other perspectives, because really that's what inclusivity means, there has to be something that we let go of to make space for that. And it could be wanting to be right. It could be that fear of, oh no, they're going to think I'm a bad person because they misunderstood me. What are you willing to make? What are you willing to let go of to make space for? What are you willing to do differently to create space to hear and better understand others? That's really the spirit behind this.
Yeah.
So any questions about that one? Or does it bring up anything for anyone that you'd like to share? All right, we'll go to the next one. Uh-oh, there we go. We slow down so we have time to think and reflect, just as we read in the community, excuse me, the art of community. And with that, it's about slowing down to hear, to understand, and allow space for perspectives to deepen and shift. In this role, especially in this leadership role, again, it's not always about right or wrong, but it's about allowing the space to hear the things that we need to hear so that as we're making decisions, we're taking into account as much as we possibly can. We have a full picture and we're making decisions. We are advocating in a way that includes as many people, in this case, students, families, our staff and teachers, as possible. And it isn't just about right or wrong, my way or your way, but just what all is on the table, and can we take the time to take it into consideration in making our decisions? Also in slowing down, this may be familiar to you as well from Director Un, her meaning-making perspective and protocol, first thought, second thought. And John and I think that this is a wonderful tool for slowing down the conversation and creating space for us to enter into the conversation where we're at. For those who may not be familiar, the first thought is like those first thoughts and emotions that pop to mind, your regular response, business as usual. And it's usually just an automatic response. The second thought comes when we take a little more time to reflect. We think a little more deeply about the issue and what came up for us in that initial response. We take others' perspectives into account, different perspectives and how things may impact stakeholders. And from those second thoughts, that's usually where we have like those deeper insights, new ideas. We get curious about different information that we may also need in order to make a good decision. And I just think that this is a wonderful protocol, especially for group communication. So one, to be able to have space to share your first thought, and for as a group to know and honor the fact that just because that's my perspective in that moment, there is space for my perspective to shift. With time, I can reflect and think and maybe have a new perspective or a broader perspective based on those things that I've reflected on. And that's really what a lot of this work requires, particularly in that idea of slowing down and really being reflective. John, is there anything more you'd like to add?
Well, we also acknowledge that in a public space, that it may be difficult to share first thoughts because you don't want to be thinking out loud. You don't want to change course. You don't want to say the wrong thing. And so often there can be the tendency to just be cautious and to be careful. But if we all know that we're in this protocol and we name it, then we can actually use the language. Here's my first thought. And then you come back later on, and these are my second thoughts. And what you're really more accountable for then are the second thoughts. And so it's almost like offering forgiveness right up front for the first thoughts. That's a very Hawaiian cultural way of being with each other. But we also acknowledge that is, it can be challenging in public space.
Can I make a quick comment on that?
Yes.
I was wondering too, first thoughts too, that I know just as more of an introverted person, I like to collect my thoughts first. And so sometimes blurting out a first thought is harder than someone who likes just to kind of think out loud. So I just wanted to mention that because that's kind of not my normal, natural way. So I just wanted to throw it out there because I think that might be a differentiation between extroverts and introverts. Just a comment.
I really appreciate that, Sharon, because as we're talking about communication agreements, you bring up another important thing to be considered. Some people do process out loud or quick to respond. And, in addition to creating space for first thoughts and second thoughts, especially knowing that you're more of a reflective thinker, then that could be something that we include in the agreements where we're making space for people who process information differently, making sure there's time for those who are more reflective to have those moments to reflect and not have to immediately jump in because everybody else is jumping in. So that's really important. I appreciate you bringing that up. Any other thoughts coming to mind on this? Any first thoughts on this?
So Tara, the only thing I would add is, and this goes back to the making space. I was thinking about it when you asked the question. I appreciated the notion of what are you willing to give up? And I think even an opportunity to, what are those different choices? I mean, I had this mental picture, right? It's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to slow down and I'm going to focus, but to really take that actionable step of how are you actually creating that space? What are you going to do to ensure that happens? That's how I process that. And I just thought that was a really tangible way to stop and think about it versus just saying, okay, I'm going to slow down. I really promise that I'll do that. So I just appreciated that kind of step in the process. So thank you.
Yeah, and I personally really like that one too, because as a group, if that's something that we're all committed to and understanding, it can help a team to build trust, right? In that, if I don't get that last word in, or if I don't explain exactly what I meant, we're going to be okay, we're going to keep the conversation moving in a productive way. And I'm doing my part to slow down and listen and understand. And, you know, there's trust that everyone is doing that and giving space for each other for that. And so that's another like really vital part of that, I think.
Yeah. And thank you, Maureen and Tara, for speaking to that, because it's also important for us to know what each other are giving up in this process. You know, and Maureen, for you to, you know, to step into that, it's important, because I know for me, when I slow down, I'm giving up my sense of urgency. You know, this need for action, and we need to take ground and make a decision and get at it and get things done. I have to give that up in order to slow down.
And part of this too, like we're just focusing on a couple of areas in terms of communication agreements, but ultimately what you decide, it is a living document. And so, you know, just again, recognizing that in public, you know, it's more than just the board of directors and folks sitting around the table having the conversation. There's a larger audience that may not have that same understanding. But the thing is that we hold on to the intention in that piece. And so if we need to come back to that and figure out different ways to communicate different things that we're trying to say, or if things have been misconstrued, you know, how do we clear the air on it? Then we come back and talk about a process or a protocol for doing that. And we hold on to that intention of creating space and slowing down to really focus on impact and not having to jump in right away, because we know there's a process that we can follow to address that in due time. But for now, I'm staying focused on what's being said and the impact on students, the impact on my colleague, whoever it may be. So before I just move us on, any other questions or comments or curiosities about that? Well, next, we will go into defining and understanding equity in education. For those of you who didn't have it prior to the meeting, hopefully Patty was able to email it to you. And John, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, you have several different definitions of equity in education, and I think even one or two outside of education. And there's some similarities and differences in these different definitions. Our purpose tonight is not to wordsmith and to come together with this, you know, consensus, because that's just moving quickly. What do we agree on, and let's get it done and move on. Our purpose tonight is to really deepen the collective and individual understanding of equity in education, and also to get a sense of what is most significant and meaningful for each of you in your own understanding of equity. And so as you identify some language or a particular definition, we want to know, why did you choose that one? Why is that meaningful for you? And do we have a, yeah. So what definition and what language actually resonate for you? And you can highlight them, and you can pick and choose from different ones, or it could be one that just really speaks to you. This captures it for me. And then what language reflects, and I love this term, your personal passion, because equity is not just a head and hands issue, it's a heart issue. It is about your passion, you know, for students and for engagement and underserved students. Again, your passions are going to be not the same, and your priorities will emerge as you share, you know, what really stood out for you and what is your why. And then after somebody shares, Tara and I are inviting the other members of the board, including students, to follow up with a question for the person who shared, to better understand why that was meaningful for them. Maybe even follow up and share back some of the words that they used to show that you actually heard them, but you want to allow them to go deeper and to make it even more personal and more meaningful. So as people share, we'll just pause and then others can ask a question. Now that's changing the discourse, because typically what we do is one person says what resonates for them, and then we go next, and then we go next. We're going to slow down. You're going to follow up with interest, curiosity, inquiry with each other. Tara, did you want to add more to the process? Mute.
Yeah. No, I think you described it well. Are we going to give a few minutes for people to review?
Yeah, let's give a couple minutes for people to just take another look, maybe highlight again a phrase, a section, or maybe a whole definition, and then be reflectful on why. What's your why? What's your passion? What's your priority as it relates to the language that you selected?
I'm happy to go first if people are ready.
Thumbs up if you're ready.
Ah.
Not quite yet. I didn't get everybody's thumbs up. Let's give it a few more seconds. And if you thought I was cool for having the moving dog in my background, I now have the snoring dog in my background, so I'm going on mute. And Jill, you want to go first?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the definition that resonated the most with me was the one by Education Northwest. The opening sentence, for us, equity means each learner and community has the opportunity to succeed. But the part about it that really calls to me is the conclusion part where it talks about producing results that are not predictable by race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. Because that feels like that's it in a nutshell for me. That's my passion.
So encouragement for somebody to ask Jill a question so that she can actually share more about her perspective. Who has the question for Jill?
So Jill, I'll ask. So as you see that, because I appreciate that statement from Ed Northwest as well. Have you thought about, in terms of your passion and your role as a board member, how we take those words and move them forward? Does that work, John and Tara, or a little bit too specific?
One minor shift, rather than how we move it forward, give it back to Jill. How does she move it forward?
No, I love that. Thank you, John. Jill, how are you going to move that forward?
That's a really good question. For me, it speaks more to where we've been. That because when we first started talking with Courageous Conversations, it was because we discovered, Superintendent Saxton at the time discovered that we could predict outcomes based on socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity. And so for me, the passion is I want to keep moving it so that we can't do that. And so the things that I would, as a board member, want to see happen so that we couldn't predict that anymore is that we would have student percentages representing all of our diverse populations matching at every level. So the same percentages of kids would be getting suspensions based on their percentage of their representation in the school district. The same number of kids would be in our IB classes based on their ethnicity, based on their population in the district. So those are really the targets that I think of that I, as a board member, would want to get to. Is, do we have the right percentages of everybody in our IB classes? Do we have the right percentages of everybody? I'm repeating myself now.
Thanks, Jill. I appreciate you going first.
Can I go?
Awesome. You bet, Eddie. That's awesome.
The one that stood out for me was Portland Public Schools. I really liked where it said the concept of educational equity goes beyond formal equality, where all the students are treated the same, to fostering a barrier-free environment where all students, regardless of race, have the opportunity to benefit equally. That really stood out to me because my whole high school, middle school life, my presence, the way I looked, was always a barrier for me.
Hey Eddie, this is Ben. Thank you for sharing that. That's pretty powerful. My follow-up question, if you're willing to speak to it, is: are there, without mentioning names or anything like that, are there specific examples in your own story that inform that belief, that you think of when, as you were reading that back, that you could see yourself or an experience that you had?
Yeah. Well, the SROs, that's a really big thing that happened. Like, I felt like I was never safe at school, just the way they looked at me. Like the way, like, I would, even if I were just to go to the bathroom, I know I had an incident where I had my hall pass, I had my planner. It said I was going to the bathroom. I had the time, the date, and I was still targeted and told to go back to class. I couldn't even use the restroom, So I felt, as a school resource officer, I should have felt safe, not targeted.
Thank you, both Eddie and Ben, because and giving Ben the choice whether or not to answer, because often our responses are personal and based in our lived experience.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Who would like to go next?
I can go. For me, the definition that stood out was the first one, well, like pieces of all, but the fact that each and every learner were actually capitalized, and that each and every learner will receive the necessary resources they need individually to thrive. I'm supposed to share why, right? Because we know that all of our students are different and do have different needs, and even separate from race, we have to know what each student needs in order to help them succeed.
Okay, who has a question for Karen? Tara and I might jump in too. So,
Well, I don't want to hog the space, but I do have a question on that, because I think, Karen, your experience as a parent with kids in the district right now is unique, and I'm wondering if that perspective weighs, or how being a parent and seeing your kids in our school system now, if that impacts how you view the definition.
It probably does, but not necessarily because of my own guys, but because of volunteering and seeing many kids. I mean, because I'm even talking about like just like different personalities and different different preferences, different subjects that they like. Just seeing how unique each student is. But I have to admit, I'm struggling with weighing that we are a public school system. We don't get to do one-on-one tutoring or one-on-one thing. So I'm struggling with the how, because if Maureen's going to ask me how,
no, not yet.
I don't have an answer to how. But yes, I do think seeing kids as a volunteer has impacted my view.
So just for the whole group, hold on to what you're hearing from each other. You know, and so right now when you're hearing from Karen, just know that her passion comes from what she has seen as a volunteer. And just know that there's something there. There's emotion, there's meaning there, you know, for her. Who would like to go next?
I will. I chose actually two. Can you guys hear me okay? The speaker's working. I chose two kind of different ones. And I asked myself kind of why I chose those. And so let me define what they are. One is the Pedro Vieira, equity defined, equality of opportunity with focus on outcomes and results. Well, it's attention to addressing the needs of all students, recognition that not all students are the same, those with less need, e.g. time, attention, support. And then schools must confront the ways in which students are denied learning opportunities. We must implement strategies to support the most vulnerable students. That's one. And then I also like parts of the one by the Education Trust. I think Education Trust had two. No, I guess not. Yeah, the Education Trust, and especially the first couple sentences, and that is, the students who are furthest behind, most often low-income students and students of color, require more of those resources to catch up, succeed, and eventually close the achievement gap. Give students who come to school lagging academically because of factors outside of school's control the exact same resources as students in higher incomes alone will not close that achievement gap. So those sections resonated with me, and when I asked myself why, I think it's because of two things. One is it uses simple language that I can understand, and hopefully others can. And then also it's more detailed. It's kind of, here's what we do. So that's that's all. I'll stop there.
So Sharon, when I hear you read that, I hear in my head, not surprisingly, since I have a special ed kid, I hear the echoes of idea, right? Of we personalize education for each individual student depending on what their needs are. Is that sort of how you see this? This is like the same thing, but for every student?
Yes. So basically, so I have the similar lens to Karen as a volunteer, just a mentor for 7 years in the high school, just seeing all the different kinds of students. And then on a personal level, volunteering in the prison system and knowing the challenges those kiddos have, the children of the women I meet with, and just how kids fall through the cracks. Sometimes we have, catches for tag kids or English language learners or special needs, but sometimes there's other kids who don't fit those categories that kind of fall through the cracks. And so, yes, I would say that mine probably, that's why I gravitate towards this kind of language, is I don't want any kid to fall through the cracks. I want to catch all of them. I know that's a lofty idea, but that's my passion.
I can go next. So I probably bent the rules here a little bit, but I took 3 short phrases from 3 different definitions. The first was equity refers to the principle of fairness. The second was those with less will need more. And then the third was results that are not predictable by identity. So the one that Jill mentioned in hers. And I like those 3 because kind of like Sharon was saying, they're very simple, very clear, concise, and they help. For me, they're pretty easy to place onto our board role and think about, like when we're crafting a budget or when we're adapting policy or when we're analyzing data outcomes. Those are like three ways for us to view our work and make some sense of it.
Ben, would you mind, because I'm trying to capture everybody's, would you mind specifying where each of those are?
Yeah, equity refers to the principle of fairness. I think that was the last one. Second to last one, glossary of education reform. Those with less will need more is Pedro Noguera. And results that are not predictable by identity, Education Northwest. And I just shortened identity, race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. I used identity to encompass, other identities as well.
So I'm going to jump in with a question for Ben. So Ben, for that quote where it says those who have less will need more, or those with less will need more. Mm-hmm. Who comes to your mind, when you're thinking of those who have less and those who will need more? What names, what faces, what experiences, come up for you?
There's one that, as soon as you asked that question, jumped to my head, and that's so my mom was a high school English teacher at North Marion School District, which is a smaller, low-income school district with a higher percentage students of color than our district. And she was a really excellent English teacher, but was like beloved by the students because she was like the cool teacher that you could hang out in her classroom during lunch, or like the students who didn't have a place to go would like find her room and stuff. And I remember I was in middle school at the time, and she asked me if I wanted to go with her one night to go pick up a student. And this was like a weeknight, and it was like 11 or 11:30 or something like that. And she was going to pick up a Latino boy who was from a Catholic family, a very Catholic family. And he was on a date. and he went to a McDonald's for his date, and the date was with another guy. And he got so caught up in this date as a high schooler that he realized he had missed the bus to get back to where he lived. And the first person he called was my mom. And so my mom just invited me to go, and it was, no big deal. I didn't really think of it as a thing at the time. But of course, when I was in high school, I had a car. I had parents I could call whenever I needed something. I didn't go on dates to McDonald's. I went to nicer places than that. And there's just this fundamental, equity refers to the principle of fairness. That's clearly unfair. That student didn't deserve anything to deserve the challenges that he had to get through, and I didn't deserve the easier path that I had for me. So that was the story that jumped out when you asked the question.
So John, I can go next, and then I'll let Rowan finish up for us. So I actually chose Ed Northwest as well, maybe for different reasons than Jill did. I did appreciate, I felt like you could read it and it was just straightforward. I also, a couple of weeks ago, attended a conference of the joint color caucuses from NSBA. And one of the caucus chairs referenced underserved students as not problems to solve, but assets to invest in. And I love that mindset. And when I read this statement about assets, and it's about growth mindset and believing every child that walks into the door has unlimited opportunities. That's why I care about public ed. Right. That's why I value it, is because it should really be that game changer for any student. And so the other piece to that, what really also connected to the mindset around assets is at the end when it talks about increased systems effectiveness. And I feel like that's a district charge. What is our vision from a strategic perspective? What should we help in making financial decisions as we invest in those programs that are going to turn the dial for students? So that was kind of where I landed.
So Maureen, I have a question. So you wear many hats, right? You have your OSBA hat, you have your TCPC hat, PSPC hat, you have volunteering, you have your own kiddos. So I'm just curious, which role has most impacts choosing this, I guess, this definition as opposed to others?
How about my accounting hat? And that's my first thought, but it resonates with me. I mean, the assets, I kid you not, I believe deeply that we should look at every child. I mean, we've, as I think through the trainings that we've done over the years, TTSD, board hat, and that belief that that's the lens that we should use and the opportunity for every student. And I know that I don't do that perfectly, but I mean, it's that belief. I think about 40 assets going way back to when I worked for the Oregon Business Council doing ed partnerships, and the assets matter. And the more opportunities that students have to engage with positive adults in their lives will have a lifelong impact on what they're able to do. So that word has value to me. And what is my charge to make a difference in ensuring that every child believes they're an asset and sees where their future's headed. So thank you, Sharon. That was a great question. So.
And then I'll give mine. And so I picked Pedro, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. So that was equity defined, equality of opportunity with focus on outcomes and results, attention to addressing the needs of all students, recognition that not all students are the same, those with less will need more, e.g. time, attention, and support. And schools must confront the ways in which students are denied learning opportunities. We must implement strategies to support the most vulnerable students. And I picked this because there's a lot of instances where I can recognize that I have opportunities that aid me in my education and that let me perform, that a lot of other students do not have. And that just inequality of opportunity leads to inequality of results. And I think that's really awful.
Who has a question for Rowan?
So Rowan, I have a question. I'm going to try to spit this out in a coherent question. As you think about your own experiences, particularly as you head towards being a valedictorian in an IB full diploma, what would you, as you think about other students, is there kind of a big idea or something that you think about that we should focus on as we do this work in this next year that kind of helps with some of those pieces? And that's a huge question, Rowan. So, but I appreciate you pointing that out, recognizing the benefits that you've received and maybe what are some of those steps that you'd like to see us continue on.
So I'm going to actually ask you to shift that again, Maureen, and shift it to Rowan. What does he want to focus on?
I love that. Rowan, what do you want to focus on as this year we spend together?
Well, yeah, I don't have anything hugely specific. But one of the main things I think about is just making sure that communication with every student is really good so that we know what students need. And so I want to work on the ways that I can connect to students outside of my own circle, outside of social media, just getting to every student to make sure that the ways that they already are harmed by inequality of opportunity doesn't like compound by the way that I personally try to interact with students and try to get feedback if I use ways that doesn't get to everyone.
Thank you.
Tara, do you have reflections for the group?
I'm just sitting and taking it in, and you know, I've done activities similar to this, but you know, every time I'm just reminded of just how powerful it is when we slow down and become curious about one another. You know, not only do I know what you said, I now know a little bit more about why you said it, what's informing that for you, you know, where your passions lie. And you know, if I were on this board, that's really important in terms of me better understanding how to work with you, how to hear and understand and be able to ask more questions to learn more about some of the things, you know, individuals share or are curious about. And even like, honestly, even sometimes people's hot buttons, you know, like sometimes you say something and someone goes in a direction, you're like, whoa, what just happened? And it's moments like these where we just take the time to learn more. We get insight to those things, understand what's going on for a person and how to work together even in those moments. So thank you everyone for sharing. I really appreciate it. And I mean, personally, I feel like I learned a lot about each of you. And even though this was a specific activity around educational equity, I hope just that practice of taking a moment and asking questions to understand more where people are coming from is something that, you know, we continue to hold on to and take, because we can take that into any conversation. Yeah, that's it for me. Anything else for you, John?
Well, I'm still really holding on to what I heard from Rowan, and just communicating with students outside of your own circle. That just really resonates, for me. And maybe I have a short attention span, and I'm just holding on to the last person who spoke. But that landed for me, and gives me encouragement and hope. Not just for the board, but for the Tigard-Tualatin community.
So because of time, we're already at 7:55, but we knew that this would happen. We're not surprised. This was just, the beginnings of these conversations, because the thing is, we can sit down and just throw up a list of agreements, but we really need to take time to kind of unpack and really think about what it is that we need and what that looks like in practice. And so, these were just some of the first steps. I'm looking for my notes here, because I actually have some questions, and these are more questions for folks to continue to reflect on, because this is just part one of creating your working agreements. But, as we go into the next phase of really outlining what it is that you all want to agree on as you work together this year, some things to consider and be reflecting on is, what do you need to create an atmosphere of trust and genuine inquiry? And what'll make you be curious? And the flip side of that could also be, what keeps you from being curious? What are those things that'll make you shut down? What will keep you engaged and committed to the process when things get messy? And don't worry, I'll type these up and send them to Patty so that she can share them with everyone. Those are just a few prompting questions, but really be thinking about what is it that you need, and how can we share that with the group? Was someone going to say something? I saw like a hand or something. I didn't.
Oh.
Oh.
Tara, I just did a thumbs up, basically.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay.
Send out to the rest of us. No, that was just like that.
And so, yeah, so in our next time together, we can talk about that more. And even, I don't know, John, like, should we do some compiling ahead of time, or what do you think would be the best way to approach that? And I'm going to go back.
In terms of what do people need in order to create this culture and have these communication agreements, and also what gets in the way. For me, it's also what opens you up and what shuts you down.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think if people were to put those in the chat or to email them to you and me, we can kind of get that list. But I think it's important to look at both sides, as you suggested.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the conditions that shut us down, or sometimes we say something but nobody acknowledges what was said, and then might be reluctant to contribute again. Or sometimes someone's voice is heard more loudly than someone else's, and they always get affirmation and credibility. But whenever I speak, you just go next. I'm just saying, those, what are your experiences? And for us to have those examples and lists will be very helpful, I think, not only for us, but to come back to work with you on really creating this culture that you want within the school board.
And this is also an opportunity, in the spirit of us doing some coaching around some of this work. It's an opportunity, if you're still, trying to put your finger on exactly what is that, that makes me shut down. I notice when this happens, this is my reaction. If you just need someone to process that with and talk it through, we can help you with that. And ultimately, you all will be sharing with each other what you need and what opens you up and what shuts you down. But just for the initial processing, it could be really beneficial to share that with John and I, and we can help structure the next session for creating the agreements.
And then just a word on the coaching, the individual coaching that you have requested and that we're planning to engage around is for every question that you asked as a follow-up question, we could slow down and interrogate that with the person who asked the question. And my experience is when we look at it, with a second or third thought, that we actually start to rewrite the questions or follow-up questions, and we get better and better at it. So getting feedback, through the coaching can also be helpful in asking questions that do let people tell more of the story and explain their why and their lived experience. And so my expectation is the more you lean into this art of community in your communication agreements, that you will get stronger in your communication with each other. Feedback is really helpful.
Yeah. Well,
Good. So John and Tara, oh, perfect.
yeah, there we go. So our next steps, working towards finalizing communications and working agreements. Let me make that smaller. Adopt working definitions of equity and educational equity. And not to say that both of these things need to be done right away overnight, but that is something that we definitely need to work towards, so that at least in this setting, when we use those words, we have a working agreement and we all know what we're referring to when we say those things and what we're working towards. Also, we met with all of you, so you know about the book that we're going to be reading, Culturally Responsive Leadership. And so this year we'll be doing book discussions around that. And as John mentioned, we'll be doing coaching. And to start off, we'll do pairs. And then, from there we can go into individual coaching. But again, just doing that team building in the process. John, is there anything that you want to add to that?
No, I think those are the next steps, and those next steps will be a springboard to more next steps.
And so, really, okay, I know we keep saying next steps, but the next step beyond this, Maureen probably hasn't even gotten a chance to see it yet, but we shared an email. It's to develop, what will our format be and our meeting times to accomplish this work, and how will it be spread out over the rest of the school year. Also, we need to make some decisions around the book discussions. John and I were thinking breaking it into maybe 4 different meetings to discuss the book. So thinking about the timing for that and when you would like to have those dates and when you're ready to start coaching. And, we'll take it from there and start building. And the next time we're back, the priority will definitely be finalizing the working agreements.
So John and Tara, I want to thank you for the outline. And I guess I would only kind of put that first deadline request just on the conversation, Tara and John, that we had this evening, that if you send those questions to Patty, Tara, then I'd like to see all board members, Rowan, Eddie, and then we'll get Emily caught up to speed. And, Sue, in terms of if you think that's appropriate, or cabinet, but I think, in terms of the board focus, to get those answers back, let's say, to Patty by next Monday. I want to offer up people a weekend to be reflective, or to kind of be able to have that space to stop and think about them. But you guys, does that work for you? Assuming Tara will get those questions to us, and then by Monday have your responses back to Patty so she can send them all back to Tara and John.
So Maureen, for a point of clarity, you'd like the cabinet to participate as well, is what I'm hearing.
Well, I guess I will leave that to Tara and John. I mean, this evening's discussion focused on the board and our student representatives. And I just wanted, and if that's kind of where we're headed, I want to make sure we stay focused on the, board development. That's kind of but I also recognize we do work together with cabinet. So John and Tara, I guess, if you're thinking this was really board and student representatives, I'm fine with that.
We can certainly take the questions to remain informed and know how potentially we can support the work going forward. But I'm just seeking clarity.
And like in the process of adopting them and discussing them, and also just it's a living document. So there's opportunities for people to provide feedback or ask questions, in the process of creating them. So.
Okay. So then, Tara, I think what you're saying is have the board and student representatives respond and answer. Perfect. Okay.
And we'll take that as advisory.
Excellent. And Sue smiles. Thank you. I look forward to that. So I'll be quiet, and board members, do you guys have any questions?
I do. Tara, can you please confirm that the book is the one by Dr. Khalifa?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Khalifa.
And Karen, I believe we can, if all are in agreement, I can get Patty to, well, I've already beat me to it. Yeah, there you go. So whoever does not have a copy, and I know some would prefer a Kindle version, we can facilitate that. So.
And Rowan and Eddie, I mean, you guys are included that. So if you need that book ordered for you, then please let Patty know that as well.
Any other questions? Well, I would like to say thank you so much for having us and being open to the activities tonight, and just sharing and engaging, because I think we all know this is really important work, and this year is going to be a doozy, as it already has been. And we're stronger together in this work. And so I just really appreciate everyone's dedication and commitment.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. And also, I appreciate your willingness to share your passion, around this work. And that meant a lot to me this evening.
Okay.
And Maureen will be in touch.
Perfect. Well, thank you all. I think we're off to an important step. And with that, I will adjourn our work session, and we'll see everyone back at 6:30 for our regular board meeting. So thank you.